it's not a job I could personally do. I think it takes someone really strong to do the care, physical care, personal care role. Like you say, we all forget where we put our keys down, where the remote control is for the telly.
I'm forgetting stuff all the time.
It's almost like, why own your own house? Because you're only going to get it taken off you later in life.
On this week's episode of the Engaging Marketeer, I'm speaking to Paul Chambers of Willowbank Care Home in Pershore. Now, Paul went through what can only be described as a spiritual experience, where he started off in sales, had a car accident, was laid up for 3 months, and then completely changed the direction of his life and his career by moving into the care industry. I'll be speaking to Paul about what exactly happened during this car accident and what caused him to have this experience and move into care. And I'll also be talking to him in some detail about dementia care, how people can find the right care home for them, and what we can do to stave off the onset of dementia. What compelled you to get involved in the care sector in the first place?
Okay, God, quite a long story.
That's all right. We've got some time.
My background personally is about 30 years in sales. Everything from telesales, telemarketing, business development, account management, all those all those roles that fall under a sort of BDM related sales role.
Yeah. And salespeople not typically ones you'd associate with being caring either.
No, absolutely not at all.
Quite the opposite, in fact.
Yeah, which is why it's a bit of a surprise to me. But you don't know what you don't know until you make those changes and things happen in your life. Which was the case for me. I had a car accident in 2019. Laid up for quite some time, and obviously when you're laid up and nothing else to think about or focus on, it's where do I go next from here? So my journey took me down a route of, well, I don't want to just pivot into any sales, selling anything, be it health and safety consultancy, whatever the scenario is. So I decided that care was going to be my next new venture. So the only way to combine my sales skills with in a care role is to sell care, I suppose, in effect. So I started my journey in domiciliary care and living care on sort of temporary contracts. After 12 months of doing those, I then went into a full-time care customer relations role in a care home environment, which is the first time I've been in a care home in my lifetime. I didn't really know what to expect. But because of my background, it was quite an easy transition with the skills I had to be able to take families on a journey and sort of hold their hands through the journey from crisis point, not knowing where to turn, to then be able to give them guidance and support and basically tell them that they're not alone. Because that's one big thing, is people thinking that they're alone, but when talking to other people in the same situation, it just gives a bit more comfort, I think.
Yeah.
And security. So doing the role and the fulfillment of supporting families and seeing them go to crisis point where emotionally, financially, all the emotions are all heightened, to then be able to break that down for them in steps in terms of the journey to a point where the family has a better quality of time with their loved ones, as opposed to having to do all the caring and being tired and everything else that goes with looking after a loved one at home, for example.
Yeah.
So that was my initial transition into care. Very quickly then found my passion, not for just supporting families, but the dementia as a disease, I just found absolutely fascinating. Whilst it's a horrible, horrible disease, the effects and the impacts and how that impacts on cognitive abilities and communication and all the other elements that dementia sort of takes away from an individual. So then I started to not just involve it into my day-to-day role and understanding the residents and dementia and how that sort of fits and getting my own head around it. Firstly, is then I wanted to did the courses to just get a bit more knowledge, and that sort of stemmed from there really. So I did a few years in a customer relations role. I then had the opportunity to come where I am now, which is Willow Bank, which is a fully residential dementia care home. The reason I took the role on, I had two options at the time that I could choose, and that was to continue down the same route within the customer relations role, or to take a slightly different tact, my experience, and then take that into a role that's more focused specifically on dementia. So I've digressed from being customer relations and holding families' hands to now into a role where focus is more on the dementia and the person themselves, and how can we help that first? How can we slow down, for want of that terminology, the progression of the dementia, and ultimately making sure that everyone sort of lives well with their dementia and has their own journey, because there is still a person behind the dementia. It might not be the same person as loved ones recognise. So, yeah.
Okay, I want to go into that whole dementia care question with you in a moment, but I want to bring you back to what you mentioned right at the start there, because it was almost a biblical moment where you were sales, and for want of a better word, salespeople, we know what they're like. You were in sales, you had a car accident, you almost like you had an epiphany and went, no, I want to go into care now. How serious was that car accident to make you change your whole career trajectory?
It wasn't, I'd say, it wasn't life changing at all. I came out fairly unscathed, other than 6 broken ribs. But being laid up for 3-4 months.
Well, that's a long time.
Period. It is a long time. You get to be alone with your thoughts, don't you, as well? So that makes me actually, when I'm back up to getting back into the work environment, do I want to go back and continue doing the same just because it's familiar, or do I want to make a difference in other people's lives and have a more satisfaction from the roles I'm doing, rather than doing the same thing day out? It sounds harsh, but without a passion, because you're selling the same things, so it's the same store, it's the same spiel. Whereas with dementia and dealing with people living with dementia, every day is so different. You can't plan for it like you can in a sales role. So you'll get in and you'll have your tasks to do for the day, and you'll go through your tasks and you'll sign people up, whatever it is. But with people, you can't do that, especially people with dementia, because how I say to some of our relatives and loved ones, it's like live TV. You really just do not know what's going to happen at any given moment. And I think that not being the same, I think, is more fulfilling than, for me personally, more fulfilling than just doing a job for the sake of doing the job, getting the paycheck, going there and paying the bills, doing it again. This is more of a, what can I do to make a difference today, other people's lives, and feel good about myself when I go. So it's a very different approach completely as an industry, and it's not something I've ever thought about before. Coming into the care industry, it's never really an environment that I've planned to come into. not for any reason other than it's not something I'd ever thought about too hard about. But once being in it and feeling the power of some positivity on someone else's emotions, someone else's day, being able to communicate little things, like just getting a smile out of somebody. It's the little thing that makes such a positive difference. And I think just having the car accident personal self, it's really helped me in terms of my well-being, because I know I'm helping other people now, rather than just selling something or other which no one's going to care about really later down the line, pretty much.
It's an odd thing to have happened, isn't it, to have a car accident and say that was really good for my well-being.
Yeah, no, you're right. It is. It sounds bizarre. But isn't that like how life sort of happens sometimes? Things happen. Like, I'm a big believer in fate, so I do believe that things do happen for a reason. Not necessarily good things to make that change happen for a positive reason. But yeah, I'm a big believer in fate.
Was there one particular person or one particular incident when you were being cared for, when you weren't able to go out and work, that made you think, this is what I want to get into? That person's what I'd like to aspire to, or be a bit like them?
To be honest, Darren, no. It was just a lot of time with my own thoughts at home, with the wife helping in and out of work, and other family members coming to, help where needed. So it didn't really come from that. To be honest, to be honest, I'm not really sure where it came from. I just know that I didn't want to, for 20, 30 years, go back into what I was doing. I wanted to do something different. So for 16 years, for example, I was in the same sales company, and you can get quite institutionalized being in the same place for such a long period of time.
Yeah.
So I think once I'd come out of that space and tried other areas, I think that's then made me think more about what is it I want to do. That makes sense.
It is sounding quite spiritual, and I'm not, but I wanted to ask, are you a religious person at all, or not?
No,
not in the slightest?
Absolutely not. No.
Wow.
No. Which makes it even more profound, I suppose, in terms of my journey and how it's took me.
Yeah.
Thanks. I have to say personally, and this is no disrespect to carers, because they do an absolutely amazing job. They work hard, they work tirelessly, they work long hours. It's not a job I could personally do. I think it takes someone really strong to do the care, physical care, personal care role. I think the carers across the whole spectrum of professional carers, they don't get the recognition or the pay even that they deserve for the role. When you're in it every day and you see how hard they work, you think, wow. I know sometimes perceptions of being a carer until you've been in a position yourself is, well, that's an easy job. I can sit down, I can chat, and I can have tea, and then I can go home. Which, as I say, living it is absolutely not the case. They don't have time. They barely have time to have breaks, let alone anything else. So that wasn't particularly a role I wanted to go into, but I just felt that there was a place for me to fit in there.
Yeah.
And that just happened to be using the skills that I had from my sales to be able to do that role and do it successfully and build up good relationships with families. And the residents, they're almost like an extended family to the home, in essence. They get them involved in the home, get them involved in what's happening in everyone's life. Tell them the sort of programs that are going on in the home that will help their loved ones. Like we've recently started cognitive stimulation therapy, and that's a program that's particularly for people living with dementia who are at the stages of mild to moderate dementia. So there is still some cognitive abilities there. Just need to unearth what it is within the brain to get that brain firing for long, as I say, to hopefully prolong the dementia for as long as it possibly can by keeping that brain active. So it's like less context for me to explain how cognitive stimulation therapy works is it's like a gym exercise for the brain. So it keeps those electrons firing, tries to overcome some of the gaps that are in the channels in the cells in the brain. And all of that, it comes as part of my fascination for how the brain works. The brain's obviously very complex. Anything to do with neuro is pretty complex. The way dementia works in the brain and the build-up sounds like it should be a simple fix. You stop these proteins from building up in the brain and these tangles, and ultimately they don't then starve that part of the brain from the blood and the oxygen that it needs to continue driving. Sounds easy, but it's taken a long time, and we're still waiting ultimately for that cure to happen.
I see a lot of ads on social media for games, like word games and mahjong, various different puzzle games, and they all promote themselves with the same possible benefit, that it keeps your mind active and staves off dementia. Is there truth to that then, that things like this can help?
There are no, as far as I'm aware, in my knowledge, I'm not an expert as such. There are ways in which you can. It's same with everything. It's eating better. It's doing exercise. It's not smoking. It's keeping an eye on your blood sugars if you've got diabetes. It's all those sort of things that we deem to be obvious, if you like, in terms of paths. Not everybody chooses those paths, but it seems to be obvious that if I smoke, then it's not going to be good for my health, etc., etc.
Yeah, we all sort of know that, but a lot of us ignore it.
Yeah, basically. So, whilst I don't think it's been proven to help, I think it's a case of a bit like say with legs. If you sit down, your mobility begins to be impaired potentially. If you're sitting there for long periods of time, all the time, that is going to impact on muscle movements and your legs. So it's like the old saying, isn't it? Move it or lose it.
Yeah.
So if you don't move your legs, you're going to lose them. So it's keeping the physical stimulation there. Well, how I see it, it's only the same context, or put it to the brain rather than the legs. So if you don't keep the brain active and there's no stimulation, then it's just going to exacerbate the process, if you like, that links on in the brain. So I believe there is truth in it in respect of it can't make the process worse by keeping the brain active. So it must somehow make some sort of difference.
Yeah. And I'm not sure this is a question that's even possible to answer. What actually causes dementia in the first place?
Cause of dementia? Oh, very tricky. It's a very tricky one.
I thought it might be.
It is. We know why. We know what happens in terms of the channels in the brain and the neurons. There's these proteins that aren't shifted away as they should do as part of the normal process, and as a result, these proteins and fats then stay around because they're not getting filtered out. So they then build up, and as they build up, they're blocking channels to other areas of the brain. And when it does that, those areas of the brain then die because it's like being strangled or starved of oxygen, for example. Um, so that is cause in terms of what starts these build-up of proteins and tangles is still a mystery.
Oh,
still it is still a mystery. Nobody actually knows.
And once someone has been diagnosed with it, presumably it's not reversible.
If once somebody has been diagnosed officially and had scans or memory tests or whatever process that individual has going to go through. Sorry, I've lost my train of thought there.
Well, that's apt.
Sorry, Darren. Yeah. Repeat the question for me. Sorry. I've gone blank. I've not had any lunch.
Well, funnily enough, I was just saying, once someone's diagnosed with dementia, I presume it's not reversible.
Like I say, very apt. No, dementia, once is took hold, for want of a better terminology, there is no reversing. There is no solving the problem immediately with a magic wand in effect. So why a diagnosis is particularly important, though, Darren, with dementia is without the diagnosis, families are still in limbo. They don't still know what's happening to their loved one. All they know is that things are different, things are changing. Now, the difference between not having and having is when you get that final diagnosis and you know where you are, then you can put things in place for that support. So until that diagnosis is there, families don't get the support that they need at all, which leaves them in no man's land, not knowing where to go. When the diagnosis is given, then there are signposts to support groups, people to talk to, and all the rest of it that sort of goes with it. It's only once that diagnosis is there.
And I imagine getting diagnosed isn't that easy as well, because if you've got a loved one that's, for want of a better phrase, getting on a bit, and they're getting a bit ratty, a bit cantankerous, as my parents certainly did, maybe they're a bit forgetful, that's just them. How do you know the difference between somebody just getting a bit old, a bit ratty, and a bit forgetful to somebody that's got dementia?
Like you say, we all forget where we put our keys down, where the remote control is for the telly.
I'm forgetting stuff all the time. I'm forgetting the name of football players I'm watching.
I'm forgetting the conversation I'm having with you. Sorry.
Exactly. Yeah.
And losing train of thought, but she does it again. So, oh dear.
We're watching a live diagnosis right here. A live diagnosis. Go ahead.
A live diagnosis. Sorry, Darren. So it is important, and in terms of being able to get that diagnosis, I think you should hit the nail on the head. That is a big problem for families. A lot of families are waiting, 12 months before they can get these diagnoses. So if you can imagine caring for, looking after whatever the case scenario is within the family environment, looking after someone who is a loved one that you're worried about, and they're not in their normal, what you class as their normal frame of mind. It might be behaviours, it might be forgetting things, it might be seeing things that aren't there, people coming in that aren't coming in, or anything like that. It's just the family are still having to live with that, but not understanding why that's happening. So it's always a massive lift off the shoulders of families once that diagnosis comes through. But you're right, the length of time it takes to do that through GPs, GP referrals, other healthcare professionals actually being involved, it is taking a very long time. And that is part of the problem in society generally.
I was going to say, how important is the diagnosis as well? Because I remember from my own mother, she was always very scatty. She would watch Quincy MD on TV twice in the day. She'd watch the first one whenever it was 1 o'clock in the afternoon on Gold, and then she'd watch the repeat 4 hours later. It'd drive my dad mad. But we didn't know that she had dementia until I remember my sister got a phone call because my mum was driving her two daughters, my nieces, who were probably about 13, 14 at the time. She was driving them somewhere in Newport. I think it was to a shop or a party at a Pizza Hut or something like that. And she got a phone call from one of her daughters saying, grandmother's taken us, nanny's taken us here, but she doesn't know where she is or why she's here. And she'd driven there with her granddaughters and then just completely didn't know why she was there or where she was. And that was such a what's going on.
Yeah, and that is another common symptom of dementia is forgetting of times, places, and even night and day, distinguishing the difference between night and day. So that's really common. Obviously, the most common symptom, I suppose, if they come to know people that think about dementia, is the forgetfulness. That is typically the main thing. And when we're saying getting things, it's things that are most recent in terms of time span, i.e., asking a question 10 minutes ago, being asked a question 10 minutes ago, and being asked the same question again 10 minutes later, and then 10 minutes again later. It's how the brain is processing the information and then the speed that it can process that information before you get a response. So, yeah.
So what does getting diagnosed actually do for you? How does it help?
It's almost like ticking the box, be able to move forward. Probably the simplest way of being able to do it. Without that ticking a box, you can't get the help that you need. Whether that's a social services professional, whether it's an adult social care professional, whether that's some case of a mental health care professional. There are so many different professionals that get involved in terms of determining the diagnosis. And I think that's what's slowing down the system sometimes. It needs more than one, and it's that time frame to do it. So that diagnosis is a weight lifted off shoulders of family who are what's going on, no idea what's happening with their loved one, who, that makes sense now, I understand it. And if you don't know about dementia, it's like with everything, isn't it? You don't know what you don't know until you're thrown into a situation, which typically with dementia is typically when a family's at crisis point and don't know what to do.
But I know from my own perspective, from what my dad did, he kind of put it off as long as physically possible, mainly because of the cost of care. So he was looking around different care homes around the town, and from his understanding of it, we were looking at over £1,000 a week. So his option was keep mum there at home and try to cope himself, or go to a care home where he's going to end up spending money that he hasn't got. So what can someone do when they're in that position?
It's always a really difficult one, and it's always something that I really empathise really with families, because basically, if you have assets, financial assets, house, savings, whatever that might be, and that equates to over £23,000,
which most people will probably have at that age.
Yeah. Then anything over that amount that's in the bank, so to speak, they're expected to self-fund and go and look at homes as your dad did at that time. Now, where finances aren't there, paid for money for a care setting, this is where social services come into play and will support. Sorry. Lost it again.
Diagnosis in action. Diagnosis in action.
I know. It's not really good fit. Not a good fitting. So the people that I think struggle the most, in my opinion, from my experience, are families that have more than £23,000, but marginally, say, for argument's sake, 23 to £30,000. Now, the difference between the threshold where local authorities get involved to help things like funding has to be at that level. So what does someone do if they're at £30,000 that can't afford to self-fund themselves, because clearly that money, that difference, that gap will be a matter of weeks in terms of funding being depleted. So it puts them in a real hard position because they can't afford permanent residency for their loved one, but then they're not in a position where they can get that help financially from local authorities. And that puts them in a different position because the only option they have, really, if loved one needs supporting outside of the home, is to quickly spend that difference of money, which might be, I say 30,000 as an example, which is whatever, 7,000 pound difference. But if the family's got, say, £60,000, you've still got a similar problem that's going to rear its ugly head in a matter of weeks, months.
Yeah.
So it's what the families do. It's a real divide and a real gap between those who are self-funding and have money, but potentially not enough money to fund for a period of time, and those that haven't got the money. So it's those middle ground families that ultimately get penalised, in effect, for having that saving, because they need to spend it first before they get help. And you have to feel sorry for particularly families that are, worked hard all their life, worked since they were 15, 16, right up until into their 60s and beyond, that have built up.
Which is exactly what my dad did.
Yeah, building up all this security, having a house, thinking that, this is a good idea, wonderful, you can pass it on to the generations, the kids love it, and down the lines. But this is simply not the case, I think, in the current climate that we're in. It's almost, don't quote me on it, it's almost like, why own your own house? Because you're only going to get it taken off you later in life. So it almost, I suppose, would make you a little bit bitter, because it's almost like, well, I've paid for all my infant's care, but then there's other residents, for example, in the home that are perhaps funded by the local authorities. So it hasn't impacted them in the same way as families who are self-funding. And that's where I really struggle to get my head around in society, how that gap is such a large gap.
And of course,
it's like a black hole in between.
With the way lifespans are increasing, the way we are an aging population, that situation is only going to go one way. It's only going to get worse. You said that you don't think it's right the way it works right now. The problem's going to get even greater. What's the solution?
Oh, gosh, if I need the solution to that, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. No. What is the solution? Everyone has their own ideas, I suppose, as what would be a best fit generally. Personally, I think there's not enough support from the government, particularly with dementia. If you're not just dealing with someone, not just dealing with someone that's just in the latter years of their life and might forget, like I say, the keys, the remote control. You're talking on a completely different level of support that's needed. Greater sport, the increased amount of stimulation that people are going to actually need from all aspects of sensory, from their sight, from their hearing, from their taste. it affects all of the senses moving forward, even diets with dementia and taste buds. So a lot of our residents will find like a lot of sugar in their tea or on their cornflakes, whatever that might be, or a lot more salt on their lunch and the chips. The reason for that is as we get older anyway, our taste will change, but with dementia, it heightens that change. So what would normally be a tasty meal, for example, I don't know, egg, chips and beans, I don't know. What would normally be a normal meal, they are having to put more salt on. It makes normal foods taste a lot less blander than what they would normally taste. So that's why I think, the choice of cream cakes for tea is the third option to something that's safer, in effect less tasteful from the palate. So there's just so much to think about when it comes to think elderly care generally, or particularly with dementia.
And in terms of the residents at your home, how are they typically funding their stays?
We have, to be honest, we have a mixture there. We have a mixture of both local authority funded residents. It's probably, I'd say, a 50-50 split to those that are self-funded. It does make you look at your life and your assets and what the future may hold, somewhat, because whilst you want to pay and support your loved one's care, you also don't want to deplete all the funds and not make the years of building it all worthless, because obviously they're not. But from a financial perspective, having squirreled all the money away and built everything up, to then have it sort of taken away on the basis of eligibility, I think is it needs to change. What that answer is, I don't have one, but we just know that there needs to be change in the system somewhere.
Yeah, you're right. It doesn't seem fair, does it, that if somebody buys a house, saves, puts money away, and then someone else who doesn't and squanders everything they've got, they both end up in exactly the same place. Just the person who saved is paying for it themselves. The person who squandered it is getting paid for by the state. It doesn't seem equitable to me, and it doesn't seem fair that the government seems quite happy with this. That's the way everything is happening. There's just something completely wrong with that situation from my point of view.
Exactly the same, and it's a real hard one when you're talking to families, because emotionally they're not at their normal during this crisis period. So it's really hard when you then throw finances into the mix, and you're saying to them, well, you're over this limit, so you have to pay for everything. And then the number one question that I always get from families is, what happens when my money runs out?
Yeah.
And it's almost a tricky one to answer, because with dementia, the process and the speed of what that journey takes the person on is very different from person to person. With some people, it can transgress very, very quickly. So all these changes are becoming more and more noticeable every day to a period, or it can go really, really slow progress. And with some of our residents here, you could sort of have quite a lucid conversation for a period of time and not know any difference. You wouldn't even probably notice that some residents have dementia. if they were to go away from that resident and then come back to them, say, an hour later, then that noticeable difference would be there. The repetitive will kick in. You might get a hello, who are you? Where have you come from? Nice to see you today, but they've already seen you an hour ago.
Yeah.
So that process can be very quick, it can be very slow. It can be 12 months, it can be 12 years. Nobody knows. Nobody knows. And I do get asked that question, what is the average lifespan of someone coming into a home with dementia? There is no answer for that. No answer at all.
I think my mum was 8 years, I think, in a home with dementia.
Yeah. Which is, again, can't even say an average. It's a long time. That is typically a long time for someone with dementia.
She had completely shut down at the end. She didn't even recognise people.
It's so sad, isn't it? Because, correct me if I'm wrong, but during that 8 years, that must have been so difficult for your family, as it is with others living with dementia. It's all, to me, it feel like almost a reoccurring loss of a loved one. So that constant grieving process, even though the loved one's still there. Would that resonate with yourself?
Yeah, it would. Yeah, because when I saw her in there, it wasn't her. It certainly wasn't the person I remembered. But I think the worst part of it for me was that my dad, who was still, I say normal, he was never normal, but he would get the bus down and give her her meals every day. Well, he'd drive originally, and then he shouldn't have been driving. His eyesight was gone in the one eye, and he was going in the other one. But he eventually admitted that he couldn't drive anymore, so he'd get the bus down and he'd give her meals. And he'd do it every single day and feed her, even though obviously they did that at the care home. Eventually he couldn't do that anymore. And then my dad passed away with my mum still there, and she had no idea that he was no longer visiting. She had no idea that he died. That's probably the saddest thing from my point of view.
Absolutely is. It absolutely is. And we have had many couples, residents come into the home as married couples, married for 70 years, etc., etc., long life together. And it can sort of resonate where you're coming from, not on a personal level, but from seeing the residents when they lose one or the other, and then one of them's left behind. Because it's always a difficult one, isn't it? And it's always the ongoing debate of, should you tell the loved one with dementia that they've lost their nearest and dearest, their lifelong partner? And is there a benefit to telling them this stage as to where they are in their journey? Some might say, morally, the person should be told and should know. And others might say, no, don't tell them, because they'll then be reliving it over and over again and asking the same question. And every time they ask it, become more and more anxious, and then that affects them more in terms of exasperating the dementia. I must sort of sit on the fence. I think it depends on the individual, on the family, and any personal preferences. So that's always a real hard, tricky one to know what the right answer is to do for someone. If that makes sense.
No, it definitely does. I genuinely don't know whether my mum was told or not, because I've got two older sisters that were dealing with most of it. So I don't know if she was told. Genuinely don't know. I imagine she probably wasn't, because I don't think she'd have understood language anyway.
Would you, in your position, would you have wanted Mum to know?
If I thought she could understand it, yes. But I don't think she could have.
So you're more inclined to not say anything because lack of capacity to understand. Is that what to say?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we wouldn't have known if she'd understood it. She might have understood it perfectly, but she wasn't able to voice that, to show that. So it could have been the horrible scenario if we told her. She understood it, and she was tormented inside and couldn't show us. That wouldn't have been nice, and we'd never have known.
And this is where the debate, is it right, is it wrong, comes into play. There's two different grounds to look at, isn't there?
Yeah.
Like I say, you've got the moral ground that actually it's her husband, she needs to be told. Also, is there a benefit in telling her at the stage in her life where she is? Is it going to make the situation worse? So there is that moral ground in it. And I don't know.
There's a question for you, because when my dad was looking at care homes, he looked at maybe 8-10 different care homes, and they were all of varying qualities. When someone is looking for a care home for their loved ones, you hear a lot of horror stories. There's a lot of videos and documentaries that are, behind the scenes of horror care homes, that kind of thing. We've all seen it. How can you choose somewhere that's right, and how do you know, what do you look for to know that this is the place that you're going to be happy to put your father or your mother till the end of their time?
Really good question. Really good question.
Oh, thank you.
I put myself in the shoes of families when I show families in the home. I had a family showing this afternoon. Once we finished, and I'm many tomorrow. My shoes, it would be, I think, the initial feeling firstly when you walk through the door. That's the first thing, because it's a bit like when you're buying a new house or new property, particularly big investment. You usually get some sort of feeling, some sort of vibe when you walk through that door, then whether it's a house, and I find that similar to care home. So what's the vibe like when you walk through? Are you being approached? Are you being seen? Are you, someone coming attentively to look after you, to deal with you? What's looking around? How are the staff interacting with residents? That, I think, is very important. So I would always look around and, almost like being a little bit nosy. So how is that carer dealing with that loved one? Is it done with dignity? Is it done with care? Is it done with patience? All of these factors, I think, come into play. So staff is a big one, because vibes are very important. And if vibe is saying to you, I don't like the way the carer handled that resident, or the way this was done, or the way that was done, then straight away it's going to set you back a bit. I think a good care home is you go in and there's a good vibe, the staff are all getting on, not just with each other, but with the residents. The whole care home has been involved right through from, and when I say being involved, I mean being involved and seeing the residents and helping the residents if they need help. So it's not just left to the carers. So anyone from housekeeping to kitchen to pivoteers to whatever the role is in the home, everyone has a part to play. If they see somebody who's perhaps a little bit distressed or a little bit wondering or anything, then just to go up to say, are you okay? Or should we sit down and just have a chat and a cup of tea? So it's not left just to the carers to that role and everyone else stand around. It's everybody's part in the home to play. Not everybody necessarily can do things like personal care or other areas, but everyone can provide some sort of at least emotional support if that's needed. So that is, I think, is a good warning sign of a good care home, is looking out for that. think good relationships with residents' families is really important. So building that trust, building that bond, building that relationship. So it literally is so the families are then an extension of the home rather than people who just visit. So I think the more families that are involved with the home, the better. And I think that's good for the home as well, because families then get talking to each other about their situations. So then it creates other wider groups, circles, friendships inside of the home, plus from everyone being together and sharing similar experiences. So staff, the environment, smells. It's always
I was thinking
really
smells.
Good. Yes. And I think stereotypically when you think of a care home, that could be the first thing that would come into my mind. Do you walk through the door and get a waft before you even start even looking around the home? It's usually a good giveaway. How both the residents and the staff present themselves. Do the residents that are already living there, do they look clean, looked after, shaven, tidy? Not got yesterday's tea down the front of them still, or whatever theirs would be certainly a sign. What activities have they got? What's the menu look like? Are there options in the menus? Where does personal care take place? There's so many different areas to look at. But yeah, I think my main ones I would say would be environment, staff, families, how that bond is. You can usually get quite an early good indication of whether there's what a tight-knit bond or whether there's no bond there at all and it's literally just residents living in home, but there's no other integration other than that. I mean, we do a lot with our local community. We have good relationships with lots of the support networks, the HUKs, the mental health meeting centre, which is a dementia centre, and we all are very good at working together for the greater good in the community. So quite often, families will talk to me and say, I spoke to such and such a major chaos, social care, and you'll go, oh yeah, they're really good, they're really nice, and it's nice to know the names all sort of come together. So I think that gives comfort to people. If someone's come to me and they've spoke to somebody at HUK, for example, and they've gone, you need to speak to Paul. He's dementia, he's well. And that's how it sort of works, really. You all help each other. And if somebody is looking, for example, for a companion at home, maybe a few little grubs, then there's places we can signpost families to for that. If that home's not quite ready for their loved one yet, quite at that stage. So it's nice to be able to support the families as a whole group, a holistic overview, and have support in any way we can, rather than saying, "Can't help with that. Get someone else. Help with that. Else." So yeah, it does make it difficult. But yeah, those I would say would be the main aspects to look at when they're in a care home.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be helpful for people. Thank you. We're almost out of time, but there's one question you kind of asked yourself earlier on, and we didn't get a full answer to this, and I have to circle back to it. I hate that circle back. Buzzspeak. You said
the curve, isn't it, during the pandemic?
Yeah, well, yeah. You said you get asked the question, what happens when the money runs out? Now, if somebody is in the home, say they've got £27,000, or they have to self-fund for a bit, when their money runs out, do they then have to find a new home, or do they then go on to government funding and can stay in your home?
That depends on care provider themselves. I think every particularly private care home provider operates very differently, depending on what their policies are, etc. Our policies at Buckland Care is we would not want any resident to have to leave our home if they're settled, they're comfortable, they're well, they're happy. Then in our head, there's no reason why you would want to undo all of that work, if you like, in terms of that individual being settled, by then picking them up and putting them in a completely different setting with a whole new place, huge place to look at typically, whole new bunch of faces, and not having a clue what's going on. It would be hard enough not being cognitively impaired to be in that situation generally anyway as a person, because it's a whole new place, it's still a strange place, it's still new places, so it does make you a little bit anxious normally.
Yeah, we as people don't like change at the best of times.
Yeah. Exactly. So, putting that down with dementia just exasperates it and makes it worse, and would certainly impact on mental health, and would certainly impact on dementia in a non-positive way, because there are such big changes. So what I'm going to say is, I suppose, in our perspective, it's not in our interest, it's not in the residents' interest, and if it's not in the family's interest, then that person stays and gets funded at whatever level through the local authority.
But I guess in some care homes, then this will happen, though, that this is something people need to look out for.
Yeah. For some care homes, the money will run out, and I've seen this happen and heard it happen many a time, that then that person then had to move on because there's no money.
Wow.
So I don't agree with that personally, because of the negative impact it has. If someone's only been in the home for a week, couple of weeks, let's for example, fine. Or if someone's settled, they've got their own little clique, friends in the home, they're happy, want to stay where they are, then why would you? Well, I don't know why they would, because it's purely down to finances at the end of the day, isn't it? And they want extra room, and the local authority are only offering X, and there's no gel with that. So unfortunately, that then ultimately impacts on that individual as well as the home finances. So what I'm trying to say is, for the sake of a few quid, why would you put someone through that?
Yeah. No, I agree. It's a bit of a somber end, but it's a bit of a somber subject. So if anyone's listening to this thinking, I'd love to find out more about Paul, I'd love to find out more about your care home, what's the best way for them to reach out to, and where can they find you?
You can find us Colesford in Pershore, very nice rural area. Willow Bank Care Home, part of Buckland Care Group, family-run business, family morals. 11 homes in the country. We're the first of the 11 homes to get 2-star rating dementia accreditation, which we only actually got at the internet in June last week. So we're really, really proud and want to share that. Willow Bank Residential Dementia Care Home in Pershore.
Okay.
And my name's Paul Chambers, and I'm the Dementia and Wellbeing Lead. And I'm happy to speak to anyone, regardless of whether they're looking Willow Bank as a preferred care home. If anybody wants to make contacts with me by the home, I'm more than happy to chat and help in what areas I can. If it's just advice, if it's just someone just wants to talk through something, then I'm here regardless of whether Willow Bank is
Okay, thank you very much, Paul. I will put the link for the website and the contact details below the podcast, so anyone listening to this, scroll down on YouTube or have a look down below on iTunes or Spotify or Amazon, whichever you're on, and you'll find the links to the care home, and get in touch with Paul below in the description. Paul, thank you very much for being a guest on the podcast. It's been absolutely fascinating.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me on.